I can blame you, but
Bruce?
Well, the obvious question then is, in 2 minutes, what is the application section used?
there you go. That's a good question. So, there's the answer. Anybody have an easy question? There's a question there, Gary.
All right. Why do Lutherans and Calvinists, Lutherans put the civil use in the Book of Concord, or the Formula of Concord, as the first use of the law, and Calvinists put it as the second use of the law? Do you know the reason for that?
The question is, Lutherans do it differently, and do I know the reason they do it differently? And it's because they're different. Remember, Luther excommunicated all of the Reformed. So we differ particularly on the Lord's Supper, which was severe enough for Luther to say you're no longer Christians. But from the time of Calvin on, we've seen, in my opinion, a more biblically responsible. We have, I think, a fuller view of the Ten Commandments and their meaning and application, and that's really the reason for the difference.
Number 2. Were Augustine, Luther, and Calvin all Erastians?
Well, by definition, no, because Erastus wasn't born yet. So, no, they're not Erastians. Augustine lived in a time when many of our ancestors, called the Aryans, were destroying all civilization, a group of people who couldn't read or write, and they destroyed everything that was good and beautiful. So that time was so very different. Luther is an Erastian.
Question in the back.
Could you speak to the enforcement issue on the first and second tables of the law?
That's one of the big questions, of how should a nation create laws and how should a nation enforce laws? So if Dr. Kinnear was right, that all men and women at all times should honor their Creator by walking according to the moral law, that this applies both to believers and unbelievers, that to be human means to walk this way, then certainly the magistrates of the groupings of the people should enforce the moral law. Does the moral law embrace both tables? We demonstrated that both the early French Confession written by Calvin, the Scots Confession, and the Westminster Confession are of one mind, that the civil magistrate must enforce both tables of the law. Again, under the essential kingship, we don't even need to move to the mediatorial kingship, so that's part of God's essential rule. Now the question is, how should that be enforced? And I think that's one of the beauties of understanding things in our own time and culture and age. So the issue is they should enforce it. If they're not enforcing it, I think that demonstrates the wickedness of the civil magistrate. How they enforce it may be different in Pittsburgh than in China, but that it should be enforced around the world is the clear teaching of the Reformed Church.
Vinky, and then we're going to take a break.
Dr. Campbell, to enforce the moral law, acknowledging the mediatorial kingship of Christ would mean that the state acknowledge him to be the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords explicitly?
Are you asking that as a question, Vic?
Yes.
So no, they need, under the essential kingship, they should enforce the moral law, let alone the mediatorial kingship.
But if they were to enforce the moral law under the mediatorial kingship of Christ, how would that differ from enforcing the moral law under the essential kingship?
Well, principally, the divines say in matters of pulpit preaching. So the divines believe that the civil magistrate, in fact, should enforce orthodoxy in the pulpit. Again, we can choose to disagree with that, but that's I think that's their teaching, understanding the mediatorial kingship and applying it to their time and culture.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gamble.